Have you ever noticed how certain musical works seem to be built out of only one or two small units? This is just one example of what can be done with the proper understanding of musical motifs. In this video, we'll learn what they are, how they work, and most importantly, what concrete techniques you can apply to take the most out of them in your own music. Let's get to it. A motif is the smallest formal unit of musical organization. We can think of them as the essential building blocks of the music. However, being small is not enough to be considered a motif. According to Arnold Schoenberg, a musical motif must fulfill these two roles. First, it must be recurrent. Motivic repetition can be used inside themes to strengthen their inner coherence, or it can be used to link different parts of a piece. And secondly, it must be memorable, so we can identify it whenever it reappears. According to these principles, almost anything could be considered a motif, from timbre, harmony, articulation, or dynamics. However, in this video, we'll stick to the traditional notion of motif as an intervallic or rhythmic shape. In both cases, at least two musical events are required in order to conform a motif. There are no fixed rules regarding how to compose a motif. Theoretically speaking, we could write whatever and let the repetitions legitimize it.
Repetition legitimizes.
In practice, however, the simpler the motif is, the easier for the listener to understand and recognize it in the future. Depending on how they are built, I distinguish two main types of motif: simple and compound. Simple motifs are usually restricted to a single bar and display only one characteristic shape. The following schemes represent the most usual pitch shapes in classical music. Sometimes simple motifs display repetitions of the same motivic shape in the span of one single bar, but as long as they are perceived as a unit, we can still regard them as simple motifs. Motifs can also extend to the following bar when the next event is felt as a resolution. Compound or complex motifs are built by the juxtaposition of two simple motifs, usually encompassing two or more bars. Sometimes compound motifs display a transposed or varied repetition of the same motivic shape, but they are articulated as two separated events. In other cases, the compound motif is built by two contrasting simple motifs. Compound motifs can be used as basic ideas, which are the essential formal units of the theme. Motifs don't always reappear literal. The following are the main types of motif treatment: embellishment and variations, fragmentation, transpositions, and symmetric treatments. Embellishments and variations may include addition of passing and neighbor tones, ornaments, and anacrusis. Rhythmic variations include the scaling of the notes' values and changes on the rhythmic patterns. Fragmentation consists of breaking down the motif into smaller segments. In the real transposition, the motif is repeated in a different pitch, but keeping the same intervals. If some of the intervals are altered in order to remain in the initial key, we speak of tonal transposition. In the varied transposition, the melodic content is changed, usually following an ascending-descending shape, but the rhythmic pattern is kept. I name symmetric treatments certain procedures that are especially common in contrapuntal music. In the mirror inversion, the direction of the melodic intervals is flipped upside down. In the retrograde, the rhythmic pattern, the melody, or both are reversed, as is written from right to left. And finally, the retrograde inversion is a mix between both. As you can see, the connection between the initial motif and the symmetric treatments is far from intuitive, so don't assume the listeners will immediately notice it. The following are the main types of motifs according to their behavior: filler, figure, imitative, contrasting versus continuous, and generative. For many authors, fillers don't stand as true motifs. They usually appear as subordinate recurrent patterns that embroider the musical space without much significant impact. They are recurrent and memorable, but also interchangeable from one piece to another. Most of accompaniment patterns fall into this category. Figures are discrete motivic units that repeat more or less unchanged throughout the piece. The harmonic content suggested by the chordal leaps is usually more important in figures than the melodic shape. In the imitative style, an initial motif is repeated next in a different voice, while a counter motif is played at the same time in contrapuntal fashion. In the contrasting type, the motifs are presented together, but later on they can be split and reappear in different places. On the other end, in the continuous style, one motif tends to have preeminence over the others. And finally, in the generative type, an initial motif is treated as the germinal seed of further and more developed structures. If you made it this far and you like what I do, consider supporting me on Patreon, where you can ask me anything or get a full review by me of your compositions and analysis. That's all for now. Let me know if this video was helpful, and see you next time.